Alright, and welcome back to the first video in a three-part series covering Chapter 2. Tonight we're going to be looking at formulas and functions within the Microsoft Excel 2016 application. So looking at some formula basics, we're going to first look at three different types of cell references. So the three types of cell references that Microsoft Excel implements are the relative cell reference, absolute cell reference, and the mixed cell reference. So we're going to go over those three and show you an example of how each of these are used within the Excel worksheet. So to start, the relative cell reference, it essentially indicates a cell's relative location. So for example, 5 rows up and 1 column to the left from the original cell containing the formula. This is the default method for referencing cells in Excel, and this is probably one of the more common methods for referencing cells within Microsoft Excel. The second formula, or the second cell reference we're going to be looking at is absolute cell reference. This is the reference of a constant or specific cell within the worksheet that's being applied or used in a particular function or calculation. So this particular type of cell reference is recommended for use in calculations where values should remain constant. These type of references appear with a $ before both the column letter and the row number. So for example, if you were to reference column B, row 4 in an absolute cell reference, you would see a $ before the letter B and the number 4. When copied, a formula containing the absolute cell reference does not change the cell reference. So if you were to go ahead and copy and paste a formula using an absolute cell reference, it would still reference directly back to that particular cell. So in this case, if we were referencing B4 in an absolute method, it would still go ahead and reference that B4 cell reference in the worksheet. And then the third formula, or the third cell reference that we're going to be looking at is the mixed cell reference. This combines the previous two, the absolute cell reference and a relative cell reference. So in this particular scenario, either the column letter or the row number has a fixed absolute reference, and the other has a relative reference that changes when copied. So for example, as we were looking at B4 before, in an absolute cell reference, in a mixed cell reference, you would put the $ before the B or the $ before the 4. So to go over examples of our different cell references, let's go ahead and find our worksheet. And so in this first table reference here that I have indicated, this is going to be an example of the relative cell reference. So in this particular report, we're doing a computation on sales commissions. I have the departments here, a commission rate for each department. Notice how the commission rates differ for the departments, and then an example of some sales within those. So if we were to look at our formulas within this particular table report, again I would hold the Control tilde button to show that, and you'll notice that in this particular computation we have B5 times C5 to get the sales commission rate for those sales. Notice how it's relative, this particular computation is relative to 2 columns to the left as well as 1 column to the left. If I were to move down here to the next total commission entry in there for the jewelry department, you'll notice again that that relative cell reference is 1 column to the left times 2 columns to the left to get that computation. And then for the clothing department, looking at that particular computation again, the sales column, which is 1 column to the left, times the commission. So we notice here that the commission rates are different, your sales numbers are different, So in this particular scenario, you would want to go ahead and use a relative cell reference. Looking down here at the second table that we have an example of absolute cell reference. And in this particular table, we're doing a computation on a required down payment for a house based on the given cost. And I've created a field here, down payment rate of 15%, and we have three houses with various listing prices, and we want to go ahead and compute the required down payment for each of these particular houses. So if you look here and notice in my computation, each one of these is going to require a 15% down payment. So our cell reference is C12 times the absolute cell reference of A13. We look at the second house, again C13, multiply that by the absolute reference of A13. And then for the third house, again, C14 times the absolute cell reference of A13. So that's a quick example to illustrate how to use an absolute cell reference. Again, you would use this when you're using a static or a common cell reference to do computations across multiple cells or fields. Moving over to the third table that I have created, this is an example of a mixed cell reference. Again, this is very similar to the absolute cell reference. Changed a couple of numbers here just to give some illustration in the difference in it. However, you'll notice that again, you can implement a mixed cell reference in this particular instance by changing the reference of the actual computation field from a $ in front of the G to just the letter G and then a $ in front of that row. So again, in each one of these computations, we're using a cell reference, whether absolute, relative, or mixed, given the requirements for what we need on that particular worksheet or report. So again, I'm going to go ahead and toggle back my formula so you can kind of get a visualization of how these computations again are calculated and displayed in here. And just for everybody's situational awareness, and again for just reviewing it, I will go ahead and upload this particular Excel worksheet so that you can download it and review in your own time. So again, this is going to conclude the first video in Chapter 2. Please stay tuned for updates with chapters video 2 and 3 for Chapter 2.